Just do it. It'll turn out okay. Except unless you're Russia invading Ukraine, that does not turn out okay.
Well, it's a bit more complicated than that, of course, but
True.
yeah.
But today, that's what we're talking about: Ukraine and the situation it's currently in, and the situation it has been in.
Yeah. And it's me. I'm back again, the Venerable Bede.
Yeah, I had that guy who placed you for a few streams. The Scythian bead wasn't the same.
Yeah. Doesn't come off the tongue as well, does it?
I hope he completed his task of separating people, separating nation and state,
Yeah.
nation and country.
I don't know. It's gonna come up again in here, kind of.
Uh, for anyone who doesn't know who you are, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. I'm just a history. I have a history degree, and I just like talking about history.
Hey, so do I. And if I had done well in college, I might be a history teacher right now.
Yeah, that might have been a thing for me too, but we'll see how things go.
Right. Well, there we go. Ukraine, history and war.
Yeah.
Let's wait, explain this first map for us.
So this is the map of the Kievan Rus. This is the first state in the Russian and Ukrainian regions. This is seen as the origins of both Russia and Ukraine. However, a major thing is that Putin says that this means that Ukrainians and Russians are the same people. They aren't. They claim descent from different principalities. Um, uh, to the southwest of Galicia and I think Volhynia. That's the one that Ukraine claims descent from, while the Russian state claims descent from Moscow.
Yeah, and this is near the end of the Mongols empire domination.
Well, the Kievan Rus actually existed before them. They actually did a lot of raiding around the area and attacked the Byzantines at the time as well. The leaders of the Kievan Rus were actually descended from Vikings. Can you give me a second? Once my dog is being weird.
Hi Maya, if you're in chat still. If anyone has any questions about this map, feel free to ask.
I'm very sorry about that. I didn't know that he was going to be barking at my door the whole time. That's my bad.
Oh, you're streaming? Bark, bark, bark. I want on the stream too. Bark, bark, bark.
Yeah. So the Kievan Rus started out as one big state under a guy named Rurik. He was a Swedish Viking.
Yeah.
That came in and took over the area. And the capital started out at Kiev, which is the current capital of Ukraine. But quickly, the various princes of the Rus.
Yeah. And this is before that they got taken over. This is before or after they got taken over by the Mongols for a while.
The Mongols come in later. You do see them on the map, but the Mongols come in and subjugate the various kingdoms, but more in a way that, like, hey, give us tribute and we'll leave you alone. Sort
I
of
like
thing.
that. He said, yeah, like, oh, either it's just trying to do us fine, and you'll live, and you get money and stuff, or you don't surrender to us, and you all die, and we still get the money.
Yeah. And the predecessor of the Ukrainian state, Galicia and Lodomeria, I think, or is it Volhynia? They actually use this the Mongols in order to become one of the more powerful root states.
The Moscow area people.
No, these are the ancestors of the Ukrainians.
Okay, okay.
They eventually become kings in their own right. The kings of Ruthenia, which is the next picture, actually.
All right, and we shall see that now.
Yeah. So this is the origins of what many Ukrainians see as the origins of their state. And for many centuries, the Ukrainians will actually not be called Ukrainians; they'll be called Ruthenians. But eventually, the rise of Moscow and the decline of the Mongols is sort of and also the rise in other states in the region, like the Poles and everything, and the Hungarians, causes the downfall of this state.
Kind of shrinks a little bit.
Yeah. It'll eventually become part of Austria, Poland, and Russia later on. But
so
the
so you're saying Russia always like this land?
Well, yeah. The thing about Russia's western boundary is it's really flat and easy to expand into. And Russia was always looking for warm water ports so that they could trade constantly. And as you can see in the south of Ukraine, you have some water.
The Black Sea.
Yeah, that's important. And to the west, in the Baltic states, you have the Baltic Sea,
which I don't think they went over there until time of Peter the Great, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. So the next.
So let's see, 1253. Let's see. No, I was thinking. Was that the time of our? Was that the 100-Year War time, or the time of the War of the Roses that we had done stuff on before?
No, that's more around the 1349 part.
Okay, it's like meanwhile, on the other side of the world, this was happening at the same time that you never knew about.
Yeah. Well, pretty interconnected, but eventually.
Go on.
No, you go on.
I'm gonna say a lot of people don't. Some people know that now, but a lot of people don't know that. Like when stuff's happening, we're focused on something right in here. Something else is happening on the other side of the country or world that we don't know about because it's happening simultaneously. But usually we focus on one thing and tunnel vision.
Yeah. And sometimes we have to in order to better understand what's going on.
And plus, it will make some kid's brain explode that everything happened every time.
Yeah. But with the expansion of Poland, Lithuania, and Russia, an interesting thing occurs. Some people that came over with the Mongols are these people called the Tatars. Now, technically, Tatar is not an ethnicity. It's a catch-all term for Turkic peoples, and there's different types of them. One of these Tatar groups ends up forming the Crimean Khanate that centers on Crimea,
and that's like the left. That's like a descendant of the Mongols Khanate or something like that, or like leftovers.
Yeah, and the Mongols and all of that actually are really important for the next people that show up for Ukraine, because they take a lot of the way they fight and the way they live from them, but ultimately they're not Turkic peoples. They're Slavic people who are fleeing the Russians and the Polish Lithuanians to the border regions where they don't have as much power, and these people are called Cossacks. I'm sure you've heard of them.
Yeah. So that is that little crescent moon-shaped land between Poland and Russia. Is that the leftovers of Ukraine of the Ukrainian people right now? Back then, I mean.
That is so we've got the Zaporozhian Cossacks in purple and the Ukrainian Cossack Hetmanate in the crescent spot.
Okay. The Cossacks.
Yeah, the Cossacks. A lot of people are fleeing the more oppressive states in the area in order to gain some freedom. And surprisingly enough, the Cossacks actually have a quasi-democratic system during this time. Some people still claim Cossack heritage to this day, but they a lot of them died during the Soviet Union. Kind of.
So, but what year? What year is this? You think?
15th century,
Okay.
sometime around in there. 16th century.
Okay, that's what I think it's by this time the Habsburg monarchy are a thing now, and the Sweden is a thing now. It's growing its empire.
Well, yeah. Then the Cossacks probably emerged a little bit earlier, but this actually looks like a 17th century.
Yeah, I see it because let's say the naming cities there. It's the St. Petersburg, so this is had to happen at least after Peter the Great conquered this area, unless they just put that map up anywhere.
The Polish and the Russians were big rivals during this period, and each one would play the different Cossacks against each other. And the Cossacks were actually really good fighters compared to, especially the Russians. But so you had a lot to deal with there.
Okay. So I guess before it was after Peter, but before everyone decided to take a chomp out of Poland.
Yeah. It might be a little bit before Peter because Peter does take some land on the Black Sea.
I said it's after because it's called St. Petersburg. I think that existed before him. Like Rockerdale was a city after our future czar.
Yeah. And in the next picture, the next map, it shows Ukraine eventually getting absorbed into the Russian Empire. And that little blue bit in the west is actually in Austria-Hungary.
And this is the beginning of the shrinking of Poland, I think.
Oh, yeah. Poland's dead. As like you can see that all of this area is now under the control of Russia.
Yeah, I think Russia, and I think it was Russia and the Austrians and maybe the Prussians or maybe Ottomans. I forget who.
It was the Prussians, Austrians, Russians. They took little chunks out of it.
It's funny. It's funny about Prussia. I think Prussia started out as a dukedom of Poland, and was like, now I'm your master.
Yeah. Well, they come out of the Teutonic Knights as well. That kind of stuff. But yeah, the Russians during this time call the Ukrainians Little Russians. And at this time, you don't really have a nationalistic view of who the Ukrainian people are. You don't really get that until the 19th century.
All right.
And a lot of stuff happens. So World War I kind of kicks off a lot for this area. because it's the collapse of the Russian Empire. The Russian Empire is dead. Uh, if one of the big things about Ukraine is that it produces a lot of food, a lot of food.
It's like
So
the breadbasket of Europe or something like that.
it's it's the bread bat. It's got some of the most. It's called black soil, the most fertile soil in the world. So of course, when uh, the Germans who during World War I were dealing with food crises, when they came up in there, they were like, "Oh yeah, give us all this food. We're gonna support your independence, so we can get food to fight the on the Western Front instead." Um, and you get Ukrainian states forming. You actually get three different ones. You get the West Ukrainian People's Republic out of um, some Austrian land and Russian land. No, that's all Austrian land. That's all Austrian land. You get the Ukrainian Republic of Kiev, and then the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. And there's a giant civil war throughout Russia and
But,
Ukraine for who's going to
but
control it.
between the two communist groups.
Yeah. Well, also the
Oh, yeah, they
whites
did.
and as well, not just communists. So, but eventually the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic wins, and that's going to have
And they become
major.
they become part of the USSR then.
Yeah,
One of
and
the
yeah, and when they originally joined the Soviet Union, the Ukraine, as it was called at the time, did not control Crimea. Crimea was part of Russia during this time, and this is going to cause one of the issues that we have in 2014 between that kind of kicks off this conflict.
Okay.
Uh,
Ready for the next slide or
oh yeah, I've been taught. Yeah,
right.
yeah. This so the green bracketed lines, that's the West Ukrainian People's Republic. The pink bracketed lines is the Kyiv, um, the Ukrainian Republic of Kyiv, which I think were White Russians, and then the green is the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic, which is the Bolshevik faction. Eventually, so in the lead up to World War II, the Soviet Union actually sides with Nazi Germany for a little bit and gets the
Oh yeah,
yeah
the island attack. That's yeah the what's this? I thought it was weird since Hitler and the Nazis hated communism, and they're like, nah, let's be friends with them for a while, so they don't kill us. Like, never mind.
yeah.
Attacking you now.
I think Stalin really wanted to ensure that they stayed together because he saw the West more as a threat to them than Germany, and he thought that with Germany occupying the West, he could gain as much territory as possible, and he kind of does during the time. He gets the yellow bits from Poland. He gets the area around Odessa, which is, I don't know what color that is. It's like a weird brownish orange that that's taken from the Romanians.
Okay, now I have a question about here, right here. This your map. Is Ukraine right now a part of the USSR? The main branch, or is it one of the satellite countries that they had influence in?
It's one of the constituent states of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union had a bunch of different republics underneath it, including the Russian.
Because because I know they had some satellite states like Germany, like East Germany and Poland and Hungary that
Yeah.
were communist border like buffer states, but I don't know if Ukraine was one of them or if it was an official part of the.
It was an official part of the Soviet Union. So, and a lot of the fighting of World War I and World War II would come through Ukraine, sadly, because it's one of those border territories. So, war between the West and Russia constantly went through Ukraine. The Holocaust was especially bad in this region, but not in the industrial way. They just line people up and shoot them. It was bad. It was bad. But eventually, yeah, the relationship between the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany breaks down. You actually get Ukrainians siding with the Nazis. One that the Russians will talk about a lot is Stepan Bandera. They'll call certain Ukrainians Banderaites because he sided with the Nazis. I don't know much about. I know that not a lot of Ukrainians actually like Stepan Bandera. He's a very divisive figure. He's more liked in the West because the western parts of Ukraine really didn't like Russia ever. But a lot of people don't. He's a divisive figure.
Okay.
But eventually, the war goes through Ukraine. It's really, really bad during World War II. But the Soviet Union takes the territory back over. And Stalin, the original conception of the Soviet Union was that the constituent republics would have their own cultures and stuff like that. They just had to look towards
be communist.
Yeah. But Stalin, of course, he was a very paranoid dude. There were actually German people who had settled under the reign of Catherine the Great that lived along the Volga, not in Ukraine, that were actually they were on the side of the Soviets in the war. But Stalin persecuted them. Another group that he persecutes are the Crimean Tatars, and the Ukrainians are persecuted as well. A lot of ethnic minorities are persecuted under Stalin after World War II. And one of the biggest things that occurs under Stalin is the Holodomor, which is the next picture. I
might be wrong. Is this one of those? This river running through Ukraine, is that like? I heard that that one of those rivers are shrinking now or something like that, or is that something else I'm thinking about?
It's the Dniester River,
okay,
or the Dniester, one of those. So Ukraine gets hit with a double whammy. The Nazis roll through, and the Nazis were not very nice to the Slavs or the Jewish population. And then further on after World War, and even a little bit before World War II, you get the Holodomor, which was essentially a state-sanctioned genocide against Ukrainian people.
Any reason why they just because?
So you have dekulakization. Kulaks were like this boogeyman that didn't really exist, but at least that's my understanding about it. Okay. I don't know much about.
So basically, you're different than us. We're gonna kill you.
Yeah, the kulaks were these supposed landowners that own land, and they were seen as like an enemy. Most of the grain that Ukraine produces, it was sent to the rest of the Soviet Union to allow for it to industrialized quicker, and there was no food left for the Ukrainians, so they starved.
Oh, like
And yeah,
be like you don't have enough food for yourselves. Too bad. It's our food now.
yeah. It was. So this has been seen as like a state-sponsored genocide against the Ukrainians. There's arguments for and against that, but a lot of these areas experience Russification as well. You're not necessarily having to be made into a Russian, but you got to speak Russian. And there's
and maybe accept our culture and our history and
yeah, they don't speak Ukrainian, all that stuff. And there's actually these two little oblasts, which is the Russian and Ukrainian word for province.
Yeah, I sort of asked this back in the earlier thing, but you said Russia's history. You said Russia and the Ukrainians came from different people, different things. It's was like the Russians, Vikings, and the Ukrainian Slavic or the Slavs area.
Yeah. They all evolve out of the same people, but they are not the same people. And yes, that is why Russia is attacking. That is exactly why I will get to that.
The hottest girls.
Yeah. It's a fight for who's got the hottest girls. Personally, the Ukrainian girls are fighting on the front line. The Russian girls are back home. So there are these two oblasts in the far east.
Far east.
So you've got Donetsk and Luhansk oblast. The Donetsk oblast is actually a lighter color. It's an orange. Can you see that?
Far east. I think somewhat. Yeah.
And then Luhansk is to the northeast of it. These are actually big. These are actually big industrial centers, and they still are to this day. This area is called the Donbass, which is a shortening of the Donetsk Basin.
Okay, according to the timeline here, this is post World War I, pre World War II.
Yeah. Well, right now I'm just talking about these two oblasts.
Okay.
These are, and there's a lot of actually Soviet propaganda saying that these two oblasts are the center of the Soviet Union because they were so important for the industrialization of the Soviet Union. And they get hit hard with Russification policies. And these two oblasts are some of the most Russian speaking in modern day Ukraine. And also, they have a sizable ethnic minority of Russians at 39% in Luhansk and 38.2%. But no matter how much the pro-Russians want you to think, speaking Russian doesn't make you a Russian in this case. Because 68.8% of people in Luhansk speak Russian and 74.9% in Donetsk. So not all of these people are actually ethnically Russian, but because of the Holodomor and intense Russification, these areas become Russian-speaking and have sizable Russian minorities, which this is one of the areas that Russia is using today as a justification for war. And you have the Donetsk People's Republic and the Luhansk People's Republic, which are breakaway states.
Breakaway states?
Yeah, they're small little breakaway republics that broke away in 2014.
Oh, so recent, more recent.
Yeah, and today that's where most of the fighting is occurring. And you can also make an argument that Ukraine is where at least one of the factors for the breakup of the Soviet Union occurs. One of the factors, of course, is the failed Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, but one of the other ones is Chernobyl, which occurs in northern Ukraine.
Oh yeah, we talked about that. Link up, I'll put the link up there in the cards. We talked about that in our nuclear power episode, about how the Chernobyl had very bad people watching their nuclear power plants.
Yeah, and the Soviet Union was being held together by this idea that the leaders knew what they were doing. Chernobyl kind of broke that, and then so did the war in Afghanistan for them. It broke this idea, and that's why you actually get
and then after that, I don't know it was before or after, but then the last Soviet president started giving people more freedom, I think.
Yeah, Gorbachev.
Yeah.
Nick. Oh, that reminds me. I forgot to talk about Crimea being added to Ukraine. Khrushchev was a Ukrainian.
The guy
And
that was the guy after Stalin.
yeah, he's the guy after Stalin. He begins de-Stalinization, giving more freedom to ethnic minorities, stuff like that, ending the gulags with possibly ending the gulag, officially ending them. Unofficially, they probably were still there.
Yeah, it's just for his enemies now.
Yeah, of course, he's not seeing the Soviet Union ever ending. So he's like, in 1954, it's probably just easier to move Crimea from Russia to Ukraine. Well, why not? It's not like anything bad's going to happen in the future in 2014. And there's actually Crimea has one of the most strategic ports for the Russians. It's the home of their Black Sea Fleet. And it's seen as like necessary for the Russians to hold, which causes issues later on. Which causes issues later on. In 1991, there's a Ukrainian independence referendum, and this is how each oblast voted. And as you'll see, Crimea, actually, you can see Sevastopol right there. It's the one that voted 57.07% to leave the Soviet Union. It's a it's a special administrative zone. And funnily enough, the Donbass, actually over 80% of them voted to leave.
Yeah, like I think the only part where it's barely people was the little peninsula down here, 54%. Everyone else is like over 80%, 90 over here 90%.
Yeah, and Crimea's economy is heavily reliant on Russia because of the naval base at Sevastopol. So
that's why that island, the little island down here, or peninsula, is
yeah, that's probably why
they're not as excited about it.
Yeah, and you actually they actually decide after independence, Russia and Ukraine would share the port, which of course makes sense as long as these two countries get along. But as soon as they stop getting along, it's going to cause issues. Because now you have a military base there. So here we're going to start getting into reasons for the current war in Ukraine. Although I do want to bring up some important stuff before that.
Okay.
Have you heard of a dude named Viktor Yanukovych?
I have not.
Viktor Yanukovych is seen widely as a he was extremely corrupt. All post-Soviet countries dealt with a lot of corruption. Ukraine is no different. Yanukovych was prime minister in 2004, and he ran for president. He's from Donbass. He grew up speaking Russian. His Ukrainian is actually really bad, which is weird because he's trying to become the president of this country when he can barely speak the language. Um, he actually supports regional autonomy for each oblast, kind of a more U.S. system, and he's really good friends with Putin. So in 2004, he runs and he wins the election, but he wins the election. He's going up against a guy named Viktor Yushchenko. Yushchenko. He's going up against him. And Viktor Yushchenko actually was poisoned by the Russians. So he has a really messed up face.
I don't see why the Russians want one of their own people in the government of Ukraine.
Pretty much. So he wins the election, but it's shown that it was corrupt, and an event called the Orange Revolution occurs because the political party Yushchenko was part of. The color of the party was orange, so everyone flew orange flags. The Orange Revolution saw Yushchenko gain power as president. Yanukovych loses the election, but we'll see him again later.
Okay.
Because even though Yanukovych is corrupt, Yushchenko is also corrupt, because corruption is a big problem in Ukraine even to this day. Sadly.
Well, it ain't the power unless at least one person's corrupt up there.
Yeah,
it's a thing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
the courts are really, really corrupt, and
right.
Actually, Ukraine is on special status to join the European Union, and one of the things they have to do to actually become a member is fix their court system.
Right. So is, I'm guessing, are these arrows here at the canal, and is that important in any way?
Yes. Still a little bit later, but essentially, Crimea has a lot of water problems, and during the Soviet era, they built a canal from the Dnieper River to supply water to Crimea.
And like I said, I think I mentioned that earlier. Is that why the river is shrinking or something, or something over there is shrinking?
The river isn't actually shrinking.
I think it's something else then. Somewhere in Europe, some kind of something's shrinking, either a river or a lake or a sea. It used to be bigger, now it's getting smaller and smaller.
Oh, the Aral Sea. That's the Aral Sea. It's over in Central Asia. It's a little further off.
Okay, so nowhere near our topic today then.
Yeah. But Yanukovych ends up winning the 2010 presidential election. And he promised he was going to move closer to Europe. Most Ukrainians at the time wanted to move closer to Europe, except for certain Ukrainians in the East, because they have greater economic and cultural ties with Russia. But most Ukrainians wanted to move towards the European Union.
Yeah, or I guess also recently NATO too, apparently.
Yeah, especially in Kyiv, which of course is where the president is. So Yanukovych actually promises, yes, I'm going to start this deal with the European Union and we'll start entering it. But in 2014, he backstabs the Ukrainian people. He turns back on this. and he joins an economic partnership with his buddy in Moscow, Russia. And this causes protests to occur in the streets. It's called, and it starts at Euromaidan. Maidan means square in Ukrainian, and actually comes from a Turkic language, which is one of those influences that the Tatars have on the Ukrainian language to this day. But the Euromaidan protests occur. It's sometimes called the Revolution of Dignity. Yanukovych is forced to flee after he used live rounds on his own people, by the way. The police shot at them. He flees to Russia, of course. So he got power back, but then he's forced to leave again because of this. And a pro-Western government is put in. And Putin has to make a decision at this point. He feels that Ukraine is moving further towards the west, and that's not good for Russia when it comes to Sevastopol. So he essentially uses the fact that they already have a military base there to send in a bunch of black-shirted thugs from his military into Crimea, and essentially does a referendum to see if Crimea will leave Ukraine and become independent, or leave Ukraine and join Russia, which were the only two options. You couldn't stay in Ukraine.
Yeah, I'm sure the first choice was a real choice too. Like,
yeah,
you want to become independent? You want to join us? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Yeah, and this is when Crimea gets annexed by Russia, which isn't the only bad thing they do. They also set up the two breakaway states. Allegedly, they did. But they deny they did. They set up the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics in the east, which actually start. At this point, the Ukrainian army was really small and really underprepared, and all you had were these right-wing militias that were willing to fight. So this is where you get the Azov Battalion, which is something Russia likes to talk about as a right-wing group that wants to kill Russians when they don't.
So what's happening on this map here?
Oh, this is the geography, because it's another justification for war. I'm not quite there yet.
Okay, I skipped ahead too soon, I guess.
Yeah. So you have this crisis in Ukraine. You get the two breakaway republics in Russia annex Crimea. As revenge for this, the Ukrainians cement up the canal to Crimea.
It's like, no water for you.
Yeah. So they do that. There's actually this starts like a really bad drought problem for Crimea. They have problems getting water. It eventually gets partially relieved by the building of a a bridge across the little. If you go back to the last photo map, Kerch is really close to the Russian mainland, and they built a bridge, but that didn't really help. So Crimea is without water. And you're good, Nestle. You actually get in 2014 in the early bits of the war. Did you hear about Flight MH17?
It sounds familiar.
The separatist states shot down Malaysian, Malaysian Airlines Flight 17, killing 298 people, most of them from the Netherlands. And Russia, of course, tries to cover this up, and poorly, of course.
Now, was the reason they did that, or they just shooting anybody?
So we actually have recordings from the head of one of the separatist states talking about what happened. Yeah, that's not very good. He actually talks about how he thought that he was shooting down a spy plane, and then when he finds out that it was just a commercial airline, he's like, no, they were just all spies. That's a lie. Like, in denial that he just killed a bunch of innocent civilians, of course. So
Yeah. That 6-year-old that there was one on that plane was totally a spy in training.
yeah. And yeah, a lot of sanctions began on Russia during this time and everything, but now we're going to get into some of the justifications for this current war. The first one is this canal. Crimea needs water, even though it's surrounded by water, but that's not water to drink.
That's salt water.
Yeah, so they need water. Actually, the Russians have conquered up to there. I don't know if they've uncemented the canal.
Okay, so 2014 still. So is this part Russia now, or is it still part of Ukraine?
Crimea is part of Russia now.
Okay.
So one of Russia's the next Russian justification, which is why I had the geography map here, is during the Cold War, they held all the way into Eastern Germany, and there's this prominent feature, as you can see, called the European Plain, relatively flat land that's perfect for armies to kind of just go in between and make rapid advances into Russia. This has always been seen as the place where invading armies come from. They had it pretty well. They were all the way up by these mountains in Germany, where they could easily block in NATO and keep them from attacking the Russian heartland. But now, Ukraine, which is extremely flat, is thinking of joining NATO, which would be bad for them because not only has Ukraine been used in the past to invade Russia, it can be used in the future to.
Yeah, well, it'll be fine if they give NATO reason to invade.
Yeah, and the next picture actually shows NATO expansion, which is the other justification.
Oh, the flat steps are easy route for horses to invade. The Mongols made use of that.
Yeah, exactly. Not that one. Must not have come in. Well, NATO essentially has added Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary, Slovakia, the Czech Republic. I don't think it's okay. Poland and the Baltic states. So Russia is feeling kind of hemmed in. They feel like it's a little too easy for them to be attacked. The next reason, these are all oil pipelines that bring. Russia essentially is an oil state that just sells oil for money, and all of these.
Yeah, I heard that's one of the. I don't know sure or not, but I heard that's one of the reasons why our gas is expensive because we're not using Russian gas anymore.
That's partly one of the reasons. I think it's more because investors are a little scared that the oil supply might dry up because of this, more than that. Germany is actually having more of an issue because, gas and oil.
Yeah, but it's either because of this war thing or it's all the president's fault. That's what most people on the Facebook are saying.
There's a lot of factors. Okay, it's not that simple.
It's the president's fault. No.
So another reason why Russia kind of wants to take over Ukraine is some of the major pipelines from most of the major pipelines from Russia to Europe go through Ukraine, and Ukraine's actually been charging them money to send oil and gas to Europe through these pipelines.
They're like, well, if we own it, then we have to charge ourselves money.
Yeah, and of course these were built during the Soviet Union, so that's why they're going through a really unadvantageous place, but that's because nobody thought the Soviet Union was going to fall, let alone the Soviets.
Now, people don't know the European Union. If you remember that, you can go to and from each country like you can in the States. Like you don't need a passport. Maybe you need some kind of passport, maybe, but you can travel through the other countries in Europe just with ease. It's probably more complicated than that, and that's gonna say it, but yeah, it's like,
yeah, gas definitely is one of the reasons why this war is occurring. The NATO thing. So when we're talking about NATO expansion, talking about the president, by the way, one of the criticisms that I really don't like hearing about Biden and what he's done in negotiating is people say he should have negotiated better with the Russians. Except the Russians were saying NATO, in order for this war to not happen, you have to leave the Baltic states, you have to leave Poland, you have to leave all of these countries, and you have to take away their national sovereignty and choice to choose what military alliances they are a part of.
Yeah, well,
and a lot of the people that are saying this are people who are against American exceptionalism, who are against Europe really needs to change its energy supply, and this war is a great example as to why, because Russia has been able to use the oil and gas exports from them to essentially hold Europe hostage, and they were kind of hoping that they would have been able to either get these concessions so they didn't feel as threatened from NATO. But I thought we were against American exceptionalism, but now America can decide the Baltic states' military alliances for them? No, they decided that they wanted to be a part of this because they're scared of Russian and expansionism. Just let them be there. And that was quite annoying hearing that personally. This is a map of this is one of, so if you see these red areas in the east, this massive block of red, Russian speakers.
Is that where the invasion is happening right now, or is that even
Yeah,
more?
that almost perfectly maps onto the separatist controlled territories before the invasion started.
Oh, before the invasion.
So another thing is Putin is trying to say Nazis control the Ukrainian government, and they want to take away the rights of people that speak Russian in Donbass. So that's one of their justifications. They're saying they're gonna start a genocide against the people of Donbass. They're saying that they've been doing a genocide against them.
Well, I never knew the Nazi Party accepted Jewish presidents.
Not only is the president of Ukraine Jewish, the prime minister is also Jewish. But another spanner in the works, so to speak, is Zelensky grew up speaking Russian. He's from one of these areas. I think he's from Kryvyi Rih, or however you say it. It's a hard Slavic name. I don't know how to say it. I'm really sorry. But he grew up speaking Russian as his first language alongside Ukrainian. So I don't know how you can say he's, yeah, exactly what Nestle said. He's a native Russian speaker.
And plus, and like our former president, he's also a former TV star.
Yes, he was also a former TV star. He was elected on an anti-corruption platform, overwhelmingly, like super popular. He has been losing popularity lately, and he's had accusations of corruption himself, but still nothing that justifies an invasion. And if you'll see in the next picture, this is actually but this is accepted. So the percentage of people who would not accept Jewish people as fellow citizens, and as you can see, Ukraine 5%,
One of the lowest in the area.
the lowest of all of these places. Russia is 14%, and currently they are employing a mercenary group called the Wagner Group, whose leader has photos on the internet with Nazi tattoos. So now also so you're equating a little bit Nazi and far right. Of course, the Russians are going to do that because Slavic people have a very bad history with Nazis, so they use that as kind of a way to like try to get the population of not only Russia but Ukraine on their side to try and topple the government so that Russia could take over more peacefully. And he wasn't expecting the response that he got, by the way, for later. Which is shown by the fact that he invaded with not enough troops. But other than that, I actually heard someone say being a Nazi isn't all hating Jews, it's also being anti-Slav. And I just stood there dumbfounded because Ukrainians are Slavs.
Oh.
What?
The Slavs hate the Slavs.
Yeah, it was quite confusing. Yeah, I don't understand it. So yeah, there might be a little bit of a far right issue in Ukraine, but the problem is the far right party's only won one seat in the Ukrainian parliament, which is called the Rada. They only won one seat. So how are we having a right-wing problem? You do have little militias like the Azov battalion, which you might have heard a bunch about. That's more because in 2014, the Ukrainian army didn't have anybody on their. They didn't have anybody. It was completely unprepared for war, and they just needed anybody. And these far right groups happen to have guns and were ready to fight. So join up.
All right.
Now, if you go to the next picture, the problems Ukraine have on defense is that it's extremely flat, and you have mostly steppe, which it's sort of hard to defend this area, and it's easy for mobile troops to come in through, which is what the Russians were partially hoping would happen. But they did kind of invade at a weird time. Have you heard of how bad Russian winters are?
I've heard the only people. Well, I don't know if it's true or not. It's actually true, but I heard the only people that ever invaded Russia during wintertime was the Mongols.
Well, yeah. Russian winters are bad. They didn't affect Napoleon or the Nazis as bad as people say it does. It still affected them badly. just wasn't the reason why they lost the wars. But they're bad. You have lots of snow, and when all of that snow and ice thaws, what do you think happens?
Mud.
Mud. There's this period. So invading Russia is hard not just because of the winter, but because of something called the Rasputitsa. Just mud everywhere. Yeah. Uh, yeah. Europe. Again, I'm just gonna be like, Europe really needs to change the way it has energy, but you got a lot of mud now that you got to go through, so you got to stick to roads, and roads are really easy to ambush tanks from, especially if you don't have the proper infantry support, which will be quite important for later on. The next photo will show what the separatists controlled before the invasion. The blue area is separatist areas, and the rest is the rest of Donetsk and Luhansk, which now that the Russians have failed to take Kyiv, this is supposedly what they're going for, and what they were going for all along. Not true. They wanted to take the whole country. They just didn't bring enough people in.
Well, I'm gonna make a joke here. That joke bad taste, but I'm sure glad Russia waited until we were done dying from COVID to start invading.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. I'm surprised we haven't had a big COVID spike because of the refugees, but hopefully nothing bad happens. So essentially, what occurs right before the war happens is the separatist states begin full mobilization of their troops. And at this point, we have reports of 50-year-olds from these areas hiding from being conscripted. That's how desperate these guys are to get men into the army to help Russia out.
Okay, now this is the thing is that have they Russia just invaded this part, the purple part, or they invaded more of it than this?
They've invaded more of it. It'll show up in the next picture. You can actually go there.
Okay, like I was gonna say, if they did that part, they can say, "Oh, we're just helping the separatists break away," but also over here, the people don't be separatists anymore. Like,
yeah, they invaded all. They were in the outskirts of Kyiv. As of March 15th, this is all that they were trying to take right here. So it begins with conscription, talks about genocide, really bad faked footage of reporters from Russia Today being attacked by Ukrainians, which they weren't. It was to be used as justification. And then Putin decides to recognize these two breakaway states as separate nations, separate states from Ukraine. Which this is when you get the UN being like, "Yay, can you stop it? Can you stop it?" And this is when people start getting like, "Oh shit, something's about to happen." And then February 24th, I was asleep, of course, when this happened. On February 24th, they started targeting important centers of Ukraine, and that's when the invasion began. They even invaded through Belarus. They invaded with about 200,000 men, and you gotta understand, this isn't enough to take Ukraine if you are thinking that there is going to be resistance. So Putin thought that the people were just going to roll over, because that's essentially what happened in Crimea and in the separatist areas of Donetsk and Luhansk. They rolled over, let the Russians come in, and then Russia essentially controlled the territory. But this time, the Ukrainians were not, and they were not letting the Russians attack freely. And this is actually the deadliest part of the war for the Russians, because they try to do what the U.S. did in Iraq. They try to bypass cities on their way to
the first Iraq or second Iraq?
Second Iraq. Well, okay. Both Iraqs, to be honest. They try this blitzkrieg movement towards Kyiv and other important centers, like in the south. The south,
because that worked out so well for us the second time around.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. Invading countries does galvanize far-right extremism. So yeah, but again, I don't believe Putin for 1 second in his justifications. They're just justifications. So you actually get this, and of course, there's actually a great video on this channel called Perun about why there were problems with the Russian army. The Russian army is based on conscripts, and they are the ones that do the infantry work. Your specialists and your the specialists that drive the vehicles, the tanks, the armored vehicles, and all of that stuff, they're the ones that are on full duty. And because Putin is unwilling to say that this is a war and is only a special military operation, conscripts aren't going into Ukraine. Only the specialists are. So you're actually getting armored vehicles that are supposed to have your driver, other people manning the car, and then the infantry that's supposed to help support the tank so that the tank doesn't get blown up, with only the driver and the two other people that man the vehicle and no infantry. So it's really bad. You're getting tanks always need infantry screens, because what the Ukrainians did essentially during this time was they let the Russians use the roads.
Yeah.
And then they'd ambush them with javelins and NLAWs, which are really,
I guess, kind of like in the old days, they needed infantry to protect the cavalry.
Yeah, exactly. And Russia essentially doesn't have that. They also are mostly using Spetsnaz, the naval infantry, and the VDV. The VDV are the airborne division. They got mauled in the first couple of days because they get airdropped without supporting infantry into essentially into the center of Kyiv. So they just get mauled. And you're getting the best of the Russian troops are getting mauled at this point. Earlier on, you get fighting in Chernobyl, which isn't good.
Yeah, I heard they tried to shut down or damage that plant again.
Well, you just don't want to. You don't want to have fighting in there. People are like, are they trying to like erase? No, Chernobyl just happens to be directly on the road from Belarus to Kyiv, so they weren't trying anything special. They were just trying to take Kyiv, of course. A major city on the east is Kharkiv. They try to take Kharkiv, but they just can't.
Belarus, is that its own country?
What? Belarus is its own country. It's a puppet of Russia. The president of Belarus is only in power because of Putin, essentially. He's extremely unpopular in his own country. And there's also fears of Moldova. There's a ethnic Russian majority part of Moldova called Transnistria that is a separatist state, and there's fears of them joining.
This just reminds me of World War II. Like the Australians are Germans. Oh, we're going to take them. The Czechoslovakian Germans. We're going to take it. You know, like okay, no problem. You know, this part over here is German people too. So we're going to absorb them too.
Yeah, that's been Russia's strategy. They are attempting to exploit ethnic Russian minorities and countries in order to destabilize these countries, and if possible, use these as justifications for wars like this one.
What of the Russian people? What of the Russian people in those states that live in Ukraine like Ukraine better?
Yes, Putin actually supports a lot of far-right politicians in Europe. So this idea that he's fighting the Nazis is really weird when he's supporting a lot of far-right people. And again, the Wagner Group, you can look up the pictures of the leader of the Wagner Group with all his SS heraldry and weird Nazi.
Yeah. Speaking of, what was the group that, speaking of SS and people like that, what was the people that Putin used to be part of, the Russian equivalent?
Oh crap! Because I know what they are today. The FSB. No, I almost said Spetsnaz. That's not it.
Oh, God.
Why can't I remember it?
Neither can I.
It's so it's called the FSB today. Not Russia. Oh, yeah. They are KGB.
That's it.
Yeah, Putin was KGB, and he was actually stationed in East Germany before the collapse of the Soviet Union. So yeah, they. Yeah, Mélenchon in France. I was following the French elections. Everybody was like, "Oh, let's get," but Mélenchon, the left-wing candidate, I doubt he would be as because he's also got this weird Euroscepticism vibe. Yeah, the far right and the far left are really weird when it comes to Russia. There's way too many far left people supporting Russia right now. Stop it. Don't do that. Just because Russia used to be the Soviet Union doesn't mean they're leftists at all. Stop it, please.
Yeah.
You're making me angry. So this initial phase of the war does not go well for Russia at all. This is where Russia loses most of the troops. They extend their.
This is day 20 of the war, almost a month in then.
March 15th. It says at the top. Day 20 of the war.
As I said.
Yeah, the horseshoe theory. Yeah. They extend their supply lines. There's actually evidence that they didn't give their troops enough food to eat, so these troops were ransacking supermarkets and stuff because they thought it was going to be a quick march to Kyiv and then they'd be marching in the streets. But the Ukrainians,
they'll be celebrating them as liberators.
Yeah, and that didn't happen. So, and a lot of bad stuff happens.
What? Bad stuff happens during an invasion of another country? When did this start happening?
This is really hard to talk about because I've seen the pictures. Don't go looking them up. They don't look very nice.
Yeah.
I
saw the video about the tank running over the car back then. Back when it happened.
Yeah. The dude actually survived that, so that was good. But essentially, Russia has abandoned most of this northern bit. They couldn't control it. This is the current up to date front line, and you see that they're just gone from Kyiv. They're out of there. And there's a suburb of Kyiv called Bucha and another one called Irpin. Um, 1,000 civilians. 1,000 civilians so far have been found murdered by Russians. Some of them hands tied behind their backs, shot in the back of the head, kind of stuff. It was really bad. I saw the photos. Don't look it up, please. I beg of you, do not. Well, yeah, of course they are, because most of the troops going in right now are the ones that have signed up to be a part of the army. If conscripts ever show up, I doubt they're going to be as convinced by Putin's propaganda. But yeah. So we've got the Bucha massacre, stuff like that. There's evidence of in other settlements of this stuff, but this is the up-to-date front lines of the war.
June 17th, about yesterday.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, this is about as most of the fighting right now is happening in the eastern front. Although there is a Ukrainian counterattack around the city called Kherson, which is in the western part of Russian control. And there was a counterattack around Kharkiv earlier, where the Ukrainians were actually able to make it to the border. Also, on the retreat, not really a good thing, because people dying isn't a good thing. But you know how Chernobyl is all irradiated?
Yeah.
There were Russian soldiers digging trenches in the Red Forest and got radiation sickness. So, yeah. Currently, the main problem for the Ukrainians is they have a lot of infantry, but they don't have enough artillery, because right now what Russia is doing is they're using their artillery to destroy cities and then just occupy them after everybody's gone.
Well, no one was here in this abandoned city, so I guess it's free. We'll just take it.
It's free real estate. So what Ukraine really needs right now is artillery, so that they can start going on the counterattack more effectively. Currently, the area of most interest is this area right here. If you see the road right there, that's the Bakhmut Severodonetsk line. This map is a little out of date, because currently the Russians control most of Severodonetsk, but there is a lot of fighting going on, and a lot of foreign legionaries are there, including Americans and Canadians. Yeah, but I don't know. I'm just reporting what I heard, okay? And this road is the only thing that the Ukrainians can use to resupply them, and it's currently under threat of bombardment from the Russians. And possibly even being severed completely, which would be really bad. Liman just fell, I think yesterday as well. And also, I totally forgot to talk about it. In Zaporozhye, there was actually fighting at a nuclear facility. Nestle just reminded me. There was fighting at a nuclear facility, and everybody was like, oh no! We're going to have another Chernobyl. But it turns out you could have dropped like a massive bomb on that nuclear facility and nothing would have happened. So we were fine. But yeah. So this is the current main focus right here. That city called Izium. Yeah. That city called Izium. The Russians are attempting to attack Sloviansk through there to try and create a pincer movement to encircle the Ukrainian troops in Lysychansk and Severodonetsk, which would be bad. We don't want that. That's where most of the best Ukrainian troops are located. The because the Russians don't have enough infantry right now. Most of their infantry is lacking. Although they are using a lot of the separatists as cannon fodder, which I guess this is what you signed up for, joining Russia.
Yeah. Speaking of cannon fodder, I don't know cannon fodder or not. I mean, there are a lot of civilians in Ukraine are fighting back too.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, it's not your fault, Neslig. I just get distracted easily.
Like, yeah. So like, me too. It's like, well, today Russia is squirrel.
Yeah. But yeah, a lot of currently the Ukrainians have actually mobilized. Now they're not fully trained, but they've mobilized 700,000 troops. The most Russia started with was 200,000, and that 200,000 isn't all going to frontline units. You have to have people in administration for the occupied territories. You have to have cooks, medics, stuff like that. So Ukraine can easily right now harass the front lines of the Russians, which is bad for them. So unless if Russia really wants to win this war, either they're going to have to use that cannon fodder more from the separatist states, or they're going to actually have to declare war in order to get conscription in, because they don't have the manpower currently to to hold this territory for long, especially once the partisans, essentially civilians that get guns and stuff from inside occupied territory to fight
But
back
is
against.
that why no one's really helping them much? They can take care of themselves pretty much. Is that why no one's really, besides sending them stuff and money?
Uh, that's well, part of it is that we don't want to have nuclear war. That'd be bad. That's why we're only sending them stuff.
No, and not getting involved ourselves.
Because we don't want to start nuclear war. That would be bad. But we need to start sending them artillery because that's what they need right now. Because the Russians, lots of artillery, they're able to absolutely just pummel Ukrainian positions into the ground. They just don't have the infantry to actually take the territory, to hold the territory that they're taking as well, especially with the amount of casualties they're taking. But the Ukrainians can't really counterattack without these heavy weapons. So this is what we really need to start sending them. We sent them a bunch of defensive weapons that helped them stop the Russian attack. But now we need to send them heavy weapons if we want them to counterattack effectively, which hopefully we start getting that stuff in there. This war is probably going to be really long. These are the two most populous countries in Europe, and it's sadly going to be one of the more deadly wars in modern history. Just look at Mariupol, what they did in Mariupol. The Russians only just took this. You went from a bustling city to just rubble.
Yeah, like this is one. I think it's like they had like electrical trolleys. Maybe I'm thinking this looks like the second thing.
Yeah, and so you'll hear people talk about the Russians having 30,000 killed. That's impossible. Killed to wounded ratios are usually 2 or 3 to 1. So if you had 30,000 dead Russians, that would be around 150,000 casualties to maybe 180,000 casualties. That would mean every single Russian on the front line has a broken leg. You can't really fight with a broken leg. the It's more likely around 15,000. The Ukrainians are also getting absolutely pummeled right now because
Yeah.
the
Yeah, I
Russian
wonder where all this green foresty land went.
yeah. Um there has been evidence that the Russians have been using thermobaric munitions. Look that up on YouTube if you want to. They suck the air out of the area and then boom. So all the air out of your lungs gets sucked out, and then if you're still not dead, you get incinerated. And these are illegal, by the way. You're not allowed to use them in war. There's evidence of them using those against areas. It's been the things that have been reported happening to Ukrainian civilians. It's just not very good. This isn't good. Don't let people make you think that the Russians are justified in this at all.
So, who is saying they're justified?
There are a lot of people on the left who are very anti-Western, that are very pro-Russia right now, that are making me quite angry. Because we should be, and I think that there are some right wingers that would willingly throw them under the bus for cheaper gas right now. The Ukrainians under the bus for that stuff.
So, this area has always been a hotbed of activity.
Yeah. It has, and it's really sad. Funnily enough, Russians being anti-Nazi yet destroying Holocaust memorials has been happening. So, okay. And also, there is extensive evidence of trench warfare going on right now. So, like World War I style battles kind of happening, which, yeah. And I'd estimate the dead between the two forces around 20 to 30,000 people have lost their lives. Combined, not just the Russians.
Let's see.
What are you looking for?
Oh, good night. I'll see what Ness typed in.
Yeah. That's really all I've got, unless you have any questions.
I probably do, but I can't think of any. So, do you think this war is going to end by this year, or is it still going to go on by next year?
It's Putin is unlikely to admit defeat. So unless he controls all of Donbass, this war will continue, and then this war will continue to tip in the favor of the Ukrainians because the Russians don't have enough men. And they just don't have enough men. The Ukrainians can overwhelm them eventually. So if Russia really wants to, Ukraine's not going to be gunning for peace right now because they want their land back. But Russia's going to be wanting it because, you know, they've taken a good chunk of territory. They can say, "Oh, I've won," but I'm not sure Putin would do that. So I don't see this war ending anytime soon, sadly.
If you never get to outpower, that is. probably not likely anytime soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like they're back to when the Soviets were and lifelong, almost like lifelong dictatorships.
Well, it never really changed, sadly, for them. The economic system might have changed, but the top-down kind of authoritarianism didn't end, and for a time in Ukraine it didn't end. Of course, Ukraine still has corruption problems, but before this war, they were becoming at least one of the more prosperous countries in Eastern Europe, and then of course now this happened, and it's going to take them a while to rebuild once the war's over.
All right.
So there are people overblowing how well the Ukrainians are doing. Yeah, they did well at the beginning, but that's because the Russians weren't playing to their strengths. Now they're not doing as well, and they really need help. There's a possibility that hundreds of Ukrainians are dying every day right now on the Eastern Front, and they need help. So lobby your governments to send heavy weapons, please. They need it.
Oh, you mentioned, I found one of those things I was looking for. Where with the right.
Oh, with people justifying Russia's war?
Yeah, kind of. Get it fast.
Oh, I did forget to say, people have said that this wouldn't have happened under Trump. The first shots fired confirmed between Russia and Ukraine happened under Trump, and all Trump did was say, "I'm not going to talk to Putin in Argentina." That's all he said. So I doubt it.
I think they mean. I think they mean. Well, not because he wouldn't have cared about. He wouldn't have cared.
Well, yeah, he wouldn't have cared. So, I mean, the Ukrainians aren't going to stand down. This idea that the Ukrainians are just like, oh, come take me over. No, this war still would have happened, and it probably would have been deadlier for the Ukrainians. Also, Afghanistan has nothing to do with this war. Stop saying that, people. Russia is doing this now because it's the only time they really can do it. Their population is aging and declining, and this is their best chance, really, to go in and try to take some territory.
Screen sharing is hard.
Yeah, oh God, that's gross. That's really gross.
Yeah, I saw that, and not side by side, but I found one side by side. Old one that says, "I'd rather be dead than red," like it's Cold War, and now.
Yeah. Well, Russia is like the perfect state for them. Like the Russians persecute gay people. Women are subservient. Yeah, of course they'd love to be Russian. They have a daddy dictator at the top, just like they wanted their daddy dictator Trump. It'd be perfect for them. They'd love it.
So, anything you want to advertise coming up?
No,
Nothing,
really.
nothing happening in the future
My
for you.
grandpa though did start a YouTube channel.
Ooh.
His first video was about how he worked on the lunar rover and how flat earthers are dumb.
Nice. You want if you want to hear about the driving on the moon and stuff, go check out his grandpa's channel.
I'll send you the link so that you can maybe put it somewhere. I don't know.
Well, I don't have any plans for right now, but hopefully I'll have another topic coming up soon before the summer ends. And in the meantime, never stop learning and enjoy the randomness. I'll see you next time. Bye.